Okay, so what I'd love to do with you today, this isn't going to be an overly technical talk. I'm not going to go deep into science. What I want to do is to give you all the chance to have a look at some of our most amazing rockpool wildlife and realise that winter really is a fabulous time to get out there. Not the easiest, but a fabulous time to get out there. And I'd love it if you go away inspired, if you're not doing it already, to go and have a rummage during these colder months and see what you can spot. Okay, let's see if my... Okay, we're off. So rock pooling in winter, it is cold very often. It is often stormy. The water gets freezing, your fingers fall off, your nose starts to hurt. But obviously during the winter there are fewer people around, the beaches are beautifully quiet and calm, and there's a huge amount to see. I said only serious rock poolers need apply, because generally when you go down in the winter you won't find hordes of little kids with nets anymore. It'll be people like me. We always say when we go down on the beach that we can spot my people a mile away. There's normally, if you see someone else on the shore with a bucket or dressed up in their waders, it'll be one of us. So what I'm going to do is take you through each month of what will determine as winter, just December, January, February. I'm going to show you some of the highlights, things that I found, the beautiful, the weird, the wonderful, and give you a bit of a flavour of what changes during the winter and what you might see. Okay, so this shot is at Hannaford, near where I live. This is in Looe. As you can see, when the tide goes out at Hannaford, it exposes a huge shallow expanse of seaweed, gravel, seagrass, rocks, which makes it a fabulous habitat. It's much studied by all of the local universities and groups. But it's by no means the only place to see any of these things. A lot of the photos I'll show you have been taken at other beaches in the area and around Cornwall. But as you can see, during the winter, there's not a huge amount of light in this photo because it's December, but the seaweed has all died back hugely from what we have during the summer. And during the summer, you're wading through absolute tangles of well, a lot of the Japanese weed as well, but the sargassum, but all sorts of different kelps and things. Everything's died back a bit, which means there are fewer of some things, but it's easier to spot others. The classic one that we see during the winter, whether it's actually because there are more of them or because it's easier to spot them, the jury may still be out on, but these stalked jellyfish, these lovely little jellyfish species that live attached to seaweeds. They have their 8 arms with the stinging tentacles on the end, and all those little white spots that make those beautiful patterns are nematocysts, the stinging cells too. So this is a Calvadosia croxmelatensis. It gets called the St. John's or the Maltese cross stalked jellyfish. Really beautiful colours. They're tiny, but I can spend hours and hours and hours in the summer trying to find one stalked jellyfish half the time, whereas in winter, because there's so much fewer seaweed plumps around, you can actually spot them quite easily. Well, I say easily, with a trained eye. Another little gem that's easier, I think, to spot during the winter are these little spider crabs. This is a Macropodia spider crab. There are lots of different species of these little spider crabs. As you can see, if you look at its nose, its rostrum, they're covered in all these amazing little hairs, these bristles, and they actually spend a lot of their time sticking bits of seaweed onto themselves. And that gives them great camouflage. But obviously that camouflage works best when there's a huge amount of seaweed around them, whereas in winter, you can spot them moving amongst the died back seaweed. So these are some of my favourite little creatures. They really are walking seaweed. I've got some others later on. One thing I tend to start seeing really around this time of year are the baby sea hares. So this is the sea slug that eats seaweeds and really becomes quite huge and fatty. You get big blobby ones that will fill up your whole hand during the summer. And you know, I've had rockpool rambles where I've had kids turn up with a whole bucket full of them, going, "Look what I found!" It's like, put them back. But these sea slugs start off absolutely tiny. For scale, in the background, behind that little red sea slug, is my thumb. Okay, my hands aren't very big, but that shape in the background, that pink background, is my thumb. So that gives you an idea of the size of that tiny, tiny little sea hare. It really was maybe, you know, maybe a couple of millimeters maximum. But as you can see, they start life as really bright red. They're always this color, the babies, bright red with a black lip around the top of what we call their parapodia, the bits that stick up in the middle. They have little black tips to their rhinophores, little black nose, and they really are fabulous little things. Very Christmassy colours, I always think. But this is the time of year where if you look really closely, you might just spot all those babies. And there are a lot of them out there because, as we know, come the summer, you'll find that often places with lots of seaweed absolutely teeming with these little creatures, which have become big and fat. And I've got further photos so you can see how they progress through January and February. We think of December as, you know, a time when there's not a great deal of colour about in the rock pools, and it's not true. As you can see, what we do get, because all the seaweeds die back and you can see the animals more clearly, you get to really appreciate their colours. So this is the shore clingfish, or Cornish clingfish as I prefer to call it, obviously. It's got these beautiful turquoise spots on its head. And the clingfish, as some of you all know, has a sucker. It's an adapted fin underneath its body, which it uses to hold on to the rocks. And if you can imagine what life is like in the winter, trying to survive in the rock pools, with the kind of storms we've had coming through, the plunging temperatures, everything else, all of these animals have to be incredibly well adapted and able to cling on in those little pools through all of this. We wouldn't last 5 minutes, you know. I couldn't survive for 5 minutes in the water this time of year. I'm rubbish. I really feel the cold. But these little animals are perfectly adapted. They can cling on, they can hide away in crevices, and they're also beautiful, which is why I think so many of us really love the rock pools. There's a lot to see. They have this lovely leopard print sort of pattern on their tails, blue spots, the duck-like beak on the front of their nose. Love them. At the other end of the scale, there are plenty of animals that are not at all easy to see, that don't have all those obviously beautiful colours. But this time of year, again, is a great time to see them because everything's died back a bit. If you see a bit of movement in the sand, then you might just spot some more unusual, this is a type of shrimp called a Philocheras trispinosus. I had to write that down for myself, you see. But the ones that I think I might forget I've written at the bottom. So the Philocheras, there are actually several species of these, and they're all weird looking. They've got the really strange rostrum and really strange noses to them. Eyes on top of their heads, absolutely mad looking things once you get to see them. But getting to see them is really tricky because they look, as you can see, exactly like the sand around them. And this is a creature that's probably only, you know, a centimetre or two long. It's really not very, very big. But the way to spot these Philocheras shrimp is that they bury themselves into the sand. And while they're under the sand, they're often working away there, and they send up what looks like a volcano of sand over them. It's just a tiny little spot in the sand, but you'll see it just billowing out lots of sand. And I've got a video at the end of this section which will show you one of these in action so you can see how to spot them. Worms, people don't always have the, you know, best view of worms. I think they're absolutely blinking amazing. You get so many different species, all kinds of different colours, shapes, sizes on the shore. I just included this photo. I think this was a Pyrenees cultifera, but I didn't have enough photos and close enough to look to be absolutely sure. But these kind of ragworms often have real iridescence to their bodies, which if you just happen to get them in the right light, they can glow out of the crevices. So this one's just in a dark little hole in the rock, but you can see all those rainbow colours coming out. Beautiful thing. This photo was taken on Christmas Eve. So we've called this crab Mary. This is just a common green shore crab. And as you can see, you've got her tail at the bottom, all that orange mass are her eggs. As you see, the shore crabs are just incredible survivors. They can live anywhere and they breed really efficiently. They produce hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these eggs and put them all out into the plankton to spread around, which is why this crab is now an invasive species in many other countries. So in the US, in Australia, South Africa, pretty much all over the world, this crab turns up in the bilge water of boats and in fisheries, and very quickly takes over everything. And you can see this one, even though it's the middle of winter, she has her eggs. There's already new life happening in the rock pools. These crabs can breed almost any time of year, but really I find in the rock pools you start to get these signs of spring very, very early compared to what you see on land. And really from sort of December into January, and certainly by February, we'll see there are more and more eggs, different animals moving onto the shore ready to breed. And the other kind of eggs that is really fun to look for this time of year, particularly great one if you've got any kids, grandkids, whoever around, wrap up warm and do a nice tide line walk and see if you can spot the egg cases of rays, so the black ones with the horns, the rays, or the cat sharks. There's a little green one that's making up the eye, the little yellowy green one. All of those rays and cat sharks lay their eggs in our inshore waters, and there's, well, I'll show you some live ones later of the cat sharks. But they wash up. The Shark Trust, if you've never done this before, look up the Shark Trust. Their Great Egg Case Hunt has brilliant guides, really clear keys. So you can take some egg cases home, soak them and find out what species you've got, and then record it into their database so that they can build up a picture of how all these different rays and sharks are doing around our coasts. So yeah, this was a fun one that we did. My son was getting into singing Baby Shark, I'm afraid, at the time. So so we made our own Baby Shark. This was on the north coast at Morganporth. So the north coast is a great place for these kind of things. I'm going to show you a little video now, hopefully if it all works, of some of these things in action. I don't know whether we'll get sound or not, but we'll see how this goes. Okay, ooh, we'll go past them. So yeah, I've got a little video at the end of each of these sections so you get inspired, hopefully, to take someone rock pooling for Christmas. There we go. That'd be a nice free Christmas present. Introduce someone to rock pooling. But you can see there's all sorts of life out there. You know, everyone associates someone with rock pooling, and that's by no means the case. Obviously, by the time we get into January, the temperatures are really dropping. It's my son's favourite hat there, his Christmas pudding hat. But it is a fabulous time to get out. You start to see all sorts of things coming into the pools, and we'll have a little glimpse. This was taken at, I think, Port not Port Nadler, it was Port Wrinkle. We went looking for stalk jellyfish. I found that if we want to do a survey of a new beach looking for stalk jellyfish, which Natural England have always seemed quite obsessed with finding, the months of around sort of January, December to February really a brilliant time to do it. So this was a day where we went out really just to do that, although I think he's got a cushion star there that he's got distracted by. Okay, so our little sea hare, our Plisia punctata, common sea hare, that we saw in the last set of slides, that was really tiny, you know, only a couple of millimeters. This one's now growing up, and you can see it's starting to get that lovely sort of cat fur kind of print pattern on its body. The colours changing a little bit from the bright red burgundy through to more orangey red, and it's starting to look a bit more like a normal sea hare. So it's growing up. January, I don't know why, but I think it's my favourite month to look for anemones. They're always there, but as the pools are a bit barer during the winter, you get a better view, and those colours just feel all the more striking for going out to look at them on a cold, dark, miserable day. And they always bring me joy anyway. So this is a gem anemone. I just like saying that. So the gem anemone, when it's closed, has all these sort of warty, verrucary things, which are horrible words for it, because this one looks kind of like a little Christmas bauble to me, a little pom-pom. They have whiter stripes down the edge of them, and they are tiny. Obviously, the photos here make them look huge. They are very, very titchy little anemones, but they are actually one of my favourites. So this is what it looks like when it's closed. And that is what it looks like when it's open. I think it's the colours of the mouth, that green with the very little pink spots at the centre, really is so striking, and those zebra tentacles. Really worth having a look, because even if you don't have brilliant tides or the weather isn't great, the gem anemones actually like to live quite a long way up the beach, away from the low tide mark. They just live in crevices in little pools all over the place. I know you've got loads of these in North Devon, because I always see them when I come up to visit, and for me they're just fabulous. And as most of you probably know, we have a lot of creatures, marine creatures, that fluoresce in ultraviolet light, that they take in ultraviolet light and give it out at a different wavelength, which makes them seem to glow in different colours to our vision, which makes it a really exciting time of year to go down on the beach with your UV torch and have a little rummage about to see what turns up. And again, gem anemones are one of my favourite things to see after dark. Everyone always takes photos of the snake locks anemones. Obviously, they're easy to spot, and they glow a really, really bright green, vivid green, look sort of witch-like. But the gem anemones glow orange and green, which is even better. I think they're the coolest. Look at that. So yeah, a gem anemone after dark. If you find somewhere on the beach, I would suggest where you know you've got some, and then take your UV torch out. Obviously, dress the part, take lights with you, be careful, don't go on a high tide or whatever, all the rest of it, but do go, because it's amazing if you can get out there and see this. Ultraviolet torches, as I'm sure you know, are pretty cheap. You can use any ultraviolet torch. It doesn't have to be some specialist marine thing, as long as you don't dunk it in the water, and you can get to see these amazing anemones. Exactly why they fluoresce, jury's out. Obviously they can't see any of this. It doesn't mean anything particularly to them, probably. It may affect how other marine creatures see them. Very likely it gives them some kind of defense against ultraviolet light from the sun, because they're very exposed in shallow pools. They don't particularly need it during the winter, but you can imagine during the summer in very exposed pools, they risk getting really damaged by ultraviolet light. So being able to fluoresce may give them some protection, but others may have views on exactly why they do it. From the really beautiful to the not considered generally quite so beautiful, but I rather like these. So this little guy is a weaver fish. Obviously they have an awful reputation. People don't like the idea of weaver fish, but we have some pools just near my house where I quite often see them. They made babies. I only ever see really tiny ones. There's often quite a few in these sandy pools if they're there. As a consequence, I never go in on that beach with bare feet ever, ever, ever. In the summer, I always have to wear shoes, because the weaver fish have a dorsal fin on their back which has spines in it, and they can raise that up, and it gives them some protection and gives you a really nasty sting if you stand on those spines. This one, I don't know, he's got his fins up. This is a friendly weaver fish, I think. I'll give you a close up so you can see that lovely face that probably only weaver fish's mother could truly love, but I think they're kind of sweet. What I love about these weaver fish, obviously it's tiny, the focus isn't great on this photo, but you can see the colours on those eyes. They really glow bright green, and yeah, I love them. They have a mouth that open, a big sort of bottom jaw that lifts up a bit like sort of, I don't know, like a wheelie bin or something. They've got a big bottom jaw. But their way they survive is by living under the sand. They can put their spine up to protect themselves, but they can hide away and then come up to feed on things as a predator. So they're really well adapted to where they live. You can see the colour as well on them, you know, when it's in the pool like that. They are actually really hard to spot. Again, it tends to be little movements in the sand. And so don't do what I'm often tempted to do, say, oh, I think there's something down there, I'll stick my hand in and see if I can get it up, because I always manage to stop myself and think, no, it could be a weaver fish, because it quite often is. Rather lovely. Another real gem that, you know, I see more during the winter for some reason are these 7-armed starfish. There are just a few places around here where I tend to see them on the shore. Young ones, I think they get much bigger out at sea. This one, it is a 7-armed starfish. It's lost 2 of its arms at the bottom and is busy regrowing them. They're just always this amazing orange colour, and again, it's those bright colours during the dark months are really fabulous to find. I think I've got some video that might show their tentacles moving coming up as well, because they have especially long tube feet underneath that they move around on. So when you turn them upside down, they have these really long tube feet all moving, which I find quite fascinating. Oh, so again, January, great time for weird things washing up. So meet Cecil. We seem to be giving names to everything today, but Cecil, who I think may still be not living, but he wasn't living when I found him, I will point out. He may still be in a jar downstairs because my son couldn't bear to part with him. This is a salp, which is a very, very bizarre creature. They look a little bit like comb jellies at first glance, I think. But they're in a completely different family. They feel really solid and rubbery if you pick one of these things up. And a salp is related to sea squirts. So they're normally very, very simple animals that live attached to rocks and have 2 little holes, an in and an out hole. They just draw water in, filter feed, put it out again. So these salps work on the same principle, except that they swim in the sea. They're actually there in the plankton, pootling about, and they are colonial animals. Effectively, they tend to form very long chains with lots and lots of these individuals on them. And actually, I think salps are, some of the deep sea salps now seem to be overtaking our bootlace worm in terms of how long they can be. They really can be enormous animals as a colony. But the individual salps occasionally wash up. This one doesn't have one in it, but there's a little amphipod called, so that's like a sandhopper, the amphipods, like little sand fleas. There's a little amphipod that lives in the sea. There are a few different species. They're the Fromina, I think, group. and they are parasites of these salps that swim about in the sea. Fairly gruesome, as these parasites always are, but fascinating. So the Phormina actually get inside a salp, because these salps are hollow. They're like a sort of tube, really. They get inside and they eat out all the inside of the salp. And then they use it as a house, really. They carry it over them, and the amphipod can then swim around using the salp as now a dead salp, really, as protection. So when these wash in, it's not unusual at all to find a Phormina amphipod inside them. So should you ever find a salp, have a proper look. But yeah, really bizarre, fascinating things. We were over the moon to find Cecil, because I think that's the only time I've ever found salps. But that was January, so always worth a look. On the north coast as well, I'll point out. So you're in a good place to look out for these things. Sadly, another thing that I tend to find a lot of during these months are discarded, lost fishing nets, ghost nets that in the storms sometimes get washed off the seabed. Some have only been in for a short time, others have been in for a while. So all of these little things here are things that I picked off a fishing net, which I recovered from the sea at Morgan Porth. It just washed into sight. Absolutely huge thing. I remember going up and down the beach, recruiting poor unsuspecting people to come and help me haul the net up, which they very kindly did, because it was way heavier than I am. There were lots more on here. The round hard things with the line concentric lines are all Devonshire cup corals. So cup corals, I've got some photos coming up of those later, but they beautiful things. We sometimes find scarlet and gold cup corals on the shore. They have these amazing translucent tentacles. They're related to anemones and other corals. They have stinging cells. But the cup corals form this hard rocky cup, this hard rocky coral inside them. And when they've died, what's left behind is that cup. So obviously this fishing net had been in for a long time. I've got various things here as well. There's a Velella at the top, which somehow got onto this. That's a by the wind sailor, a little hydrozone thing that floats around on the surface. Not quite a jellyfish. There's sponge, there's some hydroid, all sorts of things. Like I didn't try picking everything off the net because my family got a bit bored of me, but I did bring quite a few things back because I was quite fascinated by these cup corals. But it's a real problem that nets stay down there for so long that all sorts of animals get tangled up in them. Other things colonize them, but then because they're not a proper hard surface, they then get moved around, which isn't great at all. So here's a close-up of that Devonshire cup coral cup, the stony coral part. On the side, on the right-hand side, the thing that's sticking up isn't another coral, that's a barnacle, that's an Adna anglica, which may have changed its name now, I can't remember. But that little barnacle specialises in living on cup corals. That's the only place that you'll find them. You might find one on the shore because you can get them on various species. But yeah, that's the only one in my collection, because obviously I would never be able to collect one on the shore. So fascinating. Now January obviously is the perfect time for a beach picnic. Here's us in the rain, in the freezing rain on the beach at Looe. Those of you who know Looe will realise immediately this isn't Hannah Fall, where everyone normally goes. This is the other side of Looe, off the main beach. There are some rocks over there which are really quite brilliant for looking for things. But yeah, even in winter, with a bit of preparation, you can take the family down to the beach and have a picnic. You just don't want to sit still for too long. So another little video here for you of some of the things that I found in January. Okay. So as you can see, there are all sorts of things. I can't possibly show you everything in one presentation that you'll be able to find in January. So there are a few different species there. As you see, the photos don't do all the animals justice, because where you see the little weaver fish and just watch it breathing there, they're just fascinating. And similarly, under the ultraviolet light, those anemones, you probably saw there was a little amphipod that went swimming, amphipod and went swimming past. All sorts of things going on in the pools all the time. And the beauty of rock pooling, I always say, is you just never know what you might find. Moving on to February, when, you know, in my experience, it always gets even colder before it gets warmer again. And as people know me know, I am rubbish with cold. My fingers go, I don't cope at all, but I can't bear it. I have to go out in the pools in February, because by February, we start to find more things coming onto the shore that are going to be breeding there. So various species of fish come onto the shore, especially to breed. And the sea slugs you start to see as well. There are often some different species start to appear that are going to be laying their spawn any moment. But the seaweed is all starting to regrow by February. You start to see all the budding. Even now, you know, on our local beaches, I can see some of the seaweed starting to prepare for the next season. But in February, it's still down very low. It's sort of, you know, once you get to March, April, May, it'll all come flying up. So it's a great time to go out and see what you can spot on a good day. I think this photo looks to me like Porthmeor on the north coast, where I know I've met some of you before, and you've done field trips down there. It's fabulous shore, very similar to North Devon. Of course, it's a north coast beach, and it's one of my absolute favourite spots to hit in February. Now we'll revisit. I have to admit, I'll point out, this is probably not the same sea hare that we're seeing in each month, but to give you an idea of how they grow up, you can see this is now February. Our baby sea hares that were tiny little red spots have now grown up. They're taking on that brown colour, that leopard print pattern. The dark area around the top of their parapodia is now a little bit lighter, more brownish than it was. And because they're gorging themselves on seaweed, they're starting to get quite fat. And another few months, and they will be enormous. The ones that survive. I know a lot of you are experts yourself, but for those who don't know, sea hares obviously are mollusks. They're a type of slug. So that means they're related to other marine creatures like cuttlefish and squid and octopus. And the sea hare, in common with those cephalopods, can produce a cloud of ink if it gets disturbed. I try and make it something I don't see very often, but as you know, when you get to the summer and the pools are absolutely crammed with these things that you can't see amongst the seaweed, there's always a chance that you'll accidentally disturb one. And they send out this amazing cloud of purple ink, which is quite spectacular, but obviously we don't want to make them do that under any circumstance. So yeah, sea hares, fabulous creatures. Other fabulous creatures, you know me, you know I love slugs. So there are going to be a fair few slugs in my presentation, but this is the Lamasia clavigera, the yellow or orange clubbed sea slug. It's sometimes called because of all those long club-like appendages on its back. It's got that lovely long yellow twirly rhinophores that on the top of its head that look a bit like a helter-skelter. They're very small, but those colours, again, in February, when you spot one of these, make sure you get it in water so that you can see its shape, because out of the water they're just little yellow splodges on the rock. But stick one into water and they puff up and are just stunning little beasts. And yeah, by February I often see a lot of these about in the pools around here. We saw squat lobster in the last video. So this is a Galathea strigosa, the spiny squat lobster it gets called as well. We have several species of squat lobster, but the two common ones we get in the rock pools are this one, which has these most spectacular colours of reds and blues, This is a fairly young one. They're sort of more sort of yellowish when they're younger, and they get more sort of red and blue as they get older. But we also have another one, slightly larger, normally the ones I see in the pools, that are the Galathea squamifera, the common squat lobster, that have a more sort of plain browny colour. But they are fabulous little beasts. Their claws look very much like a lobster, but instead of having a long tail, they have their tail tucked underneath their bottoms, which means that they are really experts at getting away. If you ever tried to catch one of these things, what they do is they open up their tail at the back and really flap it very, 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 very fast to carry them away backwards. So if you try and get one, it just disappears off the opposite direction to what a predator is expecting. So yeah, they're little things. Slugs, glorious slugs. This is the Oladella alderi, or the white ruffed sea slug, some people call it. Very similar to the great grey, or the sheep slug as people call it, the big grey or white slug that you often see in the rock pools. But this one has a ruff of whiter serrata, little tentacle things around its neck, which makes it quite distinctive. But like the bigger sea slug, it eats anemones, so you'll sometimes find one that's like buried itself face first in an anemone and is halfway through eating it. And like the other sea slug as well, they change colour. If they eat an anemone, they can change from this white to a sort of grey or brown or mottled colour. And this one I think is still in search of a meal. What I quite like about these is the eye spots are really clear. You can see it's got a big pair of tentacles on the front of its head, the two rhinophores on top of its head, and just behind those two rhinophores, there's those black spots, and those are the eye spots. Some slugs have them really visible, and I think we're used to like the idea that your snails will have eyes on the end of their tentacles or something, and it's just seeing their eyes is kind of fun in slugs. It's February. We've seen that the shore crab has no respect for the seasons and just makes its eggs whenever. The scorpion fish, sea scorpion, Taurus bubalis, quite a common rockpool fish, is always the first that I see to lay its eggs. You know, from January, February, you can start to find big clumps. They're quite messy clumps of eggs, these, that you can sometimes find quite high on the rocks. They seem to not be very, scrupulous about where they lay them, like other fish sometimes are. And they look like golf balls. They're distinctive because they have that sort of tessellated mottled pattern around the side of them. They're sort of knobbly looking, rather than being smooth balls. Yeah, and the sea scorpion fish are brilliant masters of disguise in the rock pools. They can change colour. They lurk at the bottom of a rock pool and adapt themselves perfectly to that colour. Unlike a lot of other fish, free swimming fish, they really can't float. They can only float when they're swimming, because they don't have a swim bladder. They don't have that little pocket of gases they can control to move up and down, control their buoyancy in the water. So they are really interesting things to see, but you need to look very carefully. I think I have a photo of a scorpion fish coming up. Another great one that we see all year round, but again, when there's less seaweed around, you might find it a bit easier to spot them, the various hermit crabs. This one, I'm sure those of you who know are already shouting out at the screen, oh, look, that's a St. Piran's crab, or Clibanaris erythropus, or however you pronounce it. So this little hermit crab has two equal-sized claws. So even without the whole crab coming out here, if you look at the entrance to the shell, you can see those little black-tipped claws in the middle are about the same length and size, and they're really beautifully hairy. All of their legs are really hairy. They're very hairy little crabs. So yeah, this is St. Piran's, and I put in a more obvious photo. So if you get one that's cooperative and comes out to investigate your camera, as this one did, then you get a really good view, and you can see they've got really lovely long hairs on their legs, rocking the hairy leg look in winter, which is what we all like to do. So yeah, they have fabulous black and white spotty eyes, very distinctive. And I know, you know, these have been found, you know, probably up to your sort of area now. I don't think they've been found very much further north than the north coast of Cornwall and Devon now. But they're normally a more warmer water species. They've come back, and I remember when Jan found the first one at Porthmere on the north coast, which at the time was the most northerly record of one at Porthmere a few years back. I think it's what, 2016. She says, not quite sure. I don't do numbers very well, but it was about 2016. I think Jan found the first one up there. They'd all moved back in that summer, and I've got a little photo at the end to show you how they're doing now. But they've just naturally moved into our waters, not an invasive species. They've been found here before. They just move with the currents. Their babies go out into the plankton, so they'll end up here. Another different sort of crab now. This is the Xanthopilipes. I always get confused over which one Montagues and Rissos. I think it's Rissos they get called. But Xanthopilipes, pilipes, hairy legs. So, you know, we're having a hairy legs theme here. So this crab has lots of really long hair-like structures all along its back legs and around the back of its shell. If you put it in water, they fluff up beautifully. And they vary a lot in their colour, but I rather love this sort of pattern. You know, sometimes you find one of these crabs with this amazing mottled pattern, which must, you know, be great for fitting in, camouflaging amongst sand and gravel. Obviously gives them some kind of competitive advantage to have this pattern. And what I love, there's a fish that comes onto the shore at this sort of time of year as well, into the early spring, which in the Rockpools is February, which has a very similar pattern. And I think I've got a couple of photos here. Again, very variable fish. This one can be completely brown, but this is a fish called the Montagues sea snail. Exactly why it's called a sea snail, I'm not sure. It looks a little bit slug-like because it doesn't have, when it's out of the water, it doesn't have any sort of obvious fins. It just looks sort of a little brown lump. They have very tiny eyes. You can probably see like little eye right at the front, and they're a small fish. But they come onto the shore around January, February. I start to see them. Like the clingfish, they have a specially adapted fin on their underside, which allows them to cling onto the rocks and stay safe when all the waves are rushing past, and to hide from predators. When they're in these sorts of colours, they're really stunning little fish. I have never found the eggs of one of them. I'm not quite sure whether I would know if I did, but I'm pretty sure they do come onto the shore and they're about to breed, because they suddenly come in quite large numbers. I think it was it last year? I think it was Rob who was down at Hannaford, and we found absolutely loads of them all on one day. And it's an all or nothing sort of thing, as things are in the rock pools. Sometimes you see one, sometimes you see hundreds, sometimes you go months without seeing any. And the eagle-eyed among you will have spotted that this fish has some parasites. The little copepods, I think they are, on the side of the fish. I couldn't tell you the species of those. I didn't notice those till I got the photos home, as you do. But a lot of animals on the shore do have parasites that live with them, which obviously it's not great news for the animal that you're looking at if they have parasites, but these are all animals that are part of the ecosystem and you have a role to play in it, and I find them all fascinating in fairly equal measure. Apart from the giant Anilocra species that live on wrasse, if you've ever seen those, I haven't got any photos here because I've only found them in summer, but they look like giant wood lice. They're a typhusopod, the Anilocra, and they really do get big. You know, you find a wrasse, which is a fairly big fish, and they will have sometimes an Anilocra, which is, you know, not far off the size of their head attached to them. Absolutely horrific, but fascinating. So moving on. And this is another creature that has quite a similar pattern to those fish and the Montagues or Risso's crab. The tessellated sea squirt, Pyura tessellata, which just occasionally I'll see on the shore. So I just put that in there to show that this pattern seems to be quite a common feature that tessellated pattern. Nearly there now with all the creatures I'm going to show you. I wanted to share, this is a live cat shark egg case, so of the Scylorhinus stellaris, the greatest spotted cat shark, that's also known as bull huss, nurse hound, all those things. We have well, a couple of areas at Hannaford that are particularly good nurseries for these. Prisk Cove on the south coast, also excellent nursery for these creatures. They come in and they lay pairs of these egg cases, which are attached to the seaweeds with the long curly tendrils that you can probably see at the bottom. It looks like a climbing vine plant or something. They've got all these long curly bits, and those secure the egg case onto the seaweed at both ends, which they need because those egg cases stay in place for between 7 and 9 months on these wave swept shores. And during this time, the baby shark develops inside. So it starts as a yolk, and over time, if you get it in the right light, you can sometimes see the little shark starting to swim around. And eventually, at certain times of year, and I tend to see them from February onwards on the very lowest tides, although they may well hatch out at other times as well. I know John at Wembury is doing lots of studies on this. But really from February, from those tides, I start to see these lovely little baby cat sharks hatching out. This one was slightly out of the water, but absolutely fine. And the tide there was only going to be out for a short while. It was in the water enough to be breathing. It was perfectly happy and comfortable. The baby cat sharks seem to swim out of their egg case when they're fully formed and stay around the egg case for at least a few days, because quite often you'll sort of find the same little baby cat shark just around its egg case for the first few days. And then they grow up, and this one would probably be, you know, I don't know, sort of as long as my hand or so, a little bit longer. But when these are fully grown, they grow to about 1.80 m, I think it is, which is pretty long. That's longer than I am tall. So yeah, this will grow up hopefully to be a huge cat shark. And they're very docile things. There's no need to be worried about any sharks in our waters. There's no need to be worried about sharks generally, unless you're swimming somewhere that has great white sharks in South Africa, then you might want to be careful. What's fascinating about these is their skin. You can see it in this photo, the texture of the skin, which is made up of lots and lots of little spines. If you try and rub your hand over it the wrong way, it'll pretty much take your skin off. So the cat shark skins used to be used as sandpaper by fishermen in the old days. I'm not advocating that, but what it does is it enables them to be very hydrodynamic, to swim very well in the water. And as you've heard, shark skin technology being used in swimwear, in paints that they want to apply to boats to try and make them more fuel efficient, because the structure of the cat shark skin enables them to move through the water very efficiently with less drag. So very cool. And I think I always assume they're called cat sharks because they have the catty slit eyes that you can see there. Someone else might know different. Maybe they meow or something, but yeah, I've always assumed it's because of the slitty eyes they have. Nothing. These aren't the best pictures because I've tried to only include photos that I've taken during the winter months. I do have better photos of scarlet and gold cup corals than this. But in February, on a windy day, at the very bottom of a gully with the waves coming in, this was my best shot. But if you get reasonable weather in February, there's no reason you can't get out on the very lowest tides to places that you might not otherwise. And some of the things that are resident there all year, you're just as likely to see in February as you are in July, August. But you have the beach to yourself, which is a bonus if you're a hermit like me. So these are scarlet and gold cup corals. As you can see, there are two different colour forms here. Occasionally we do see the very yellow form. There's another species of cup coral called the sunset cup coral, which is quite similar but has longer and a different number of tentacles to to these. But those are both the same species. I always get sort of excited when I see a different one, think, oh, maybe I found a sunset coral on the shore, but very unlikely. We talked about the scorpionfish, the sea scorpion, Taurus pubalis earlier. So this is that fish with a little Risso's crab gate crashing there. He's a photo bombing. But as you can see, the scorpionfish like to lie on the bottom of the pool and just blend in with colours around them. They just look like another rock. And their defence tends to be to just stay very still, which means, you know, they're quite easy to observe and watch. You know, if you find one, you can watch it really, really easily. I've done a few parasites. I hope I'm not putting people off rockpooling. I'm trying to inspire you here. But it's just fascinating. You find one animal and you think you know everything, and then someone like Dave Fenwick, in this case, obviously, shows you something else. So these are little parasites that live in the gills of the scorpionfish. They may live on other things as well, but that's where I tend to see these ones. These are actually the larval stage of an isopod of Gnathia pranzina. I wrote it down for myself. I can't remember this one. Gnathia pranzina. But what I rather love is they're bright green. They're just fascinating little things. They really are quite striking against the white gills if you can see one. So if I'll point out that although they're called scorpionfish, sea scorpions, whatever, they don't sting. They're not vicious. They're not nasty. They do have spines on their head. So if you're picking one up, it's best to pick it up from underneath and to be careful on those spines, because if one of them should pierce your skin, it might well get infected or something. But they're not any bother. They're lovely fish. But yeah, if you pick one up, and it will naturally sort of open up its gills if you take it out of the water for a second, and you can see these little green Gnathia larval stage creatures in there. So for those of you who are really serious about rockpooling, these kind of things are fabulous, aren't they? You just discover more and more things about animals that you thought you knew. And behold, some of our most common creatures are just stunning. And this is a sea lemon. It's probably one of the most common sea slug, other than the sea hares that you might see. Probably the most common nudibranch that I see on the shore. You can find it quite high up on the beach. They feed on sponges, which is why they have these amazing colours, because they like to blend in amongst all those amazing coloured sponges. But isn't she just beautiful? This is so the Doris pseudo-argus, or the sea lemon. The big fluffy bit on the back is the gills, so that's what the nudibranchs breathe through. When they're out of the water, they pull those gills inside. They pull their rhinophores down as well, so they just look like a sponge, just look like a blob on the rock. But if you happen to find one out in the open like this, and this was a real beaut, they are stunning things, and all that colour in February. I mean, yeah, can't beat it. So I've got another video for you, the last one.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
There's me rocking the February look. So brilliant. So really what I want to do today is just show you just a whole variety of stuff that you might find during the winter months. There's loads more, and you know, what you may find on your local beaches could be completely different to what I find, but that's the beauty of it. So yeah, my publisher won't forgive me if I don't mention my books at the end of my talk. The one on the left, Rockpool, came out a couple of years ago, came out this year in paperback as well, for those like me who have a more limited budget. And that's very much taking you on this sort of journey, the sort of thing we've done today, introducing you to the lives of various creatures, working down from the top of the shore down to the bottom of the shore, getting from the common and well-known into the more bizarre and mysterious as we go along. And you know, my aim with that book, like today, really is to inspire people to find out more, to get excited, as I do. I do get very excited about rockpool creatures. And on the right there, super exciting. This time I'm doing a children's book. It is all written and off with the designer, and I think this is going to be the cover. It's called Beach Explorer, and you know, I'm really passionate about getting young people out into the wild generally, but obviously to beaches, and getting really engaged and discovering how everything works for themselves. I'm sure, you know, we all as kids had those opportunities, else we probably wouldn't be here, you know, today, interested in these things. The chance to go out and see things, hold things, touch things, smell things, experience how wildlife works. So what I've written is a book which takes children through a load of hands-on activities. There are 50 activities where they do hands-on things to find out how the beach is made, how tides work, why the sea's salty, all those sorts of things. Discover the lives of the different animals, try and work out how to stop seagulls snatching your sandwiches, those kind of activities. And with a section at the end which is all about looking after your beach, and you know, really empowering children to get out there and do beach cleans, to make changes in how they do things at home that will have an influence on our seas. So I am super excited about this book. Slightly more dubious about the fact schools are probably going to ask me to come in and do talks about it, but we'll see how we go with that. But yeah, that will be out in May, and with September publishing again. So yeah, obviously I would love it if you get that. Last slide here for today. You'll be pleased to know, then you'll get your comfort break. These shells, all the little shells on here, and there were hundreds more all around this rock. Every single one of them has a baby St. Piran's hermit crab, the one with claws in it. For the last few years, we had this big settlement of these St. Piran's crabs, and they started off as very tiny ones and grew up on the shore. There's been quite a lot of discussion about whether they are here to stay, because in order to spawn, the water has to be above a certain temperature, and they need certain conditions to survive on our shores. And then they've normally been found further south in Brittany and places. Around here, certainly, and all around Cornwall, we're getting lots of sightings of colonies of juveniles, and they really do form little nurseries. That's what I rather love. You find these rocks that just have hundreds and hundreds of these tiny little St. Piran's crabs. Every single little shell has a St. Piran's crab in it. And this was taken around March, April this year. I think this was a lockdown photo, so this wasn't actually taken during the winter, but I just wanted to add this on the end because it's a little good news story that these crabs seem to be here to stay now. So yeah, we'll see what happens with water temperatures. It's not necessarily a great thing if water temperatures are going up, but yeah, that's where we are.